Welcome to Lesson 5 in Unit 13, Adapting to Change. In this lesson, students will answer the question, how do living things get what they need to survive? They will figure out that different animals have different structures, and their adaptations help an animal get the kind of food they need to survive. Different animals consume different types of food, and food chains show the relationship between consumers and producers in a particular ecosystem. In the Engage portion of the lesson, start by asking students how living things get their food in an ecosystem. Have them turn and talk to a neighbor about their ideas. Continue the discussion as a whole class, asking them to think of the living things in the ecosystem around the school and how those living things get their food. Show them this video clip of an owl regurgitating an owl pellet, without offering any explanation of why this is happening. Ask them to share their thoughts about what the owl may be doing. In the Explore portion of the lesson, explain what students observed in the owl pellet video. Tell students that they are going to dissect an owl pellet, carefully taking it apart to see what is inside. Although the owl pellets provided are sterilized, safety precautions such as wearing goggles, washing hands after handling, and not touching their faces during the labs should absolutely still be taken. For this lab, separate students into pairs or groups and give each group the following materials: nitrile gloves, a paper plate to place the owl pellet on, half of a petri dish for holding cleaned bones, tweezers to pull apart the pellet, a few toothpicks to help carefully pick out bones, a magnifying glass to see the bones better, and an owl pellet. Explain to them that they will have to go very slow and be careful to avoid breaking bones. Students can use these printed bone charts to help them identify the bones found. If desired, have students color in the bones that they have found within their owl pellet. On this owl pellet lab sheet, found in the student journal, they can also record their observations. Save any cleaned bones in the petri dishes to use in later parts of this lesson. To clean up after the dissection, throw away the gloves, fur, any owl pellet debris, and the paper plates. Clean the tables with soapy water and have students wash their hands with soap. In the Explain portion of the lesson, start by asking students if there are any questions they had about what the owl was doing in the video that were unanswered by dissecting the owl pellet. What does the owl pellet tell us about how an owl gets what it needs to survive? After students watch this video about what owl pellets are, ask if any other questions they had were answered, and allow them to think, pair, share. Then use the Read Aloud book, What Does an Animal Eat? A detailed read aloud guide with specific support for related vocabulary is available in the teacher pages. The kit also includes one of the following books: Around One Log or Under One Rock. Look for the book included in the kit and read this book aloud to students as well. A detailed read-aloud guide for either book is also included in the teacher pages. In the Elaborate portion of the lesson, students will model food chains that show interactions between organisms within an ecosystem and how those organisms get food energy. Model making a food chain using the owl pellets and the forest ecosystem cards. Here is one example of such a food chain. Then ask students what adaptations the owl and vole in the example may have that help them survive. Put students into groups, giving each group a poster and the matching cards. Give them time to match the cards with the animals and read the backs of the cards for a description. Ask them to then make their own food chain on this student journal page. Give students some time to think, pair, and share about what would happen if one of the organisms in their food chain was placed in another ecosystem. Encourage them to use the descriptions on the back of the cards to help support their ideas. Finally, connect to the unit phenomena by asking students to think about a food chain for bees. Here is one example to share. In the Evaluate portion of the lesson, students return to this journal page and respond to the last question shown here. After giving them time to share out, return to the unit phenomena of the disappearing bees and ask what we have figured out in this lesson that will help us figure out a solution to the problem. It may be helpful to record their responses on chart paper so that students have evidence of how their thinking is evolving over time. By the end of this lesson, students will describe different ways animals get their food, describe examples of structures animals have to get their food, and create a model to show how living things get food energy in a Missouri ecosystem.